Duh. Subscribe to the channel. The sun filled the hospital park with autumn rays, and from this each leaf was filled with a special, bright color. Marina happily smiled and a couple of times stepped on the orange leaf with her foot. Just a couple of months as she got into the hospital and just fell in love with this alley. She was good at any time of the year, and the patients really liked to walk around here. "Oh, our Marishka is coming!" joyfully shouted one of the patients, as always in a great mood. The patients loved her. They said that she, with her smile, helps them recover, but Marina wanted to treat her for real because she dreamed of becoming a doctor from the 5th grade. She could not enter the free department. She did not have enough points, and she had nowhere to take money from, and there was no one to help. Until recently, she lived with her father, who was only doing what he drank, completely unwilling to get a job. Olga, Marina's mother, got along with him when her daughter was in the 7th grade. Then he still held on and drank on weekends or holidays. But as soon as Olga died unexpectedly because of the torn trombone, everything changed in 1 hour. He began to pour almost every day to his father, and soon he was fired from his job. Then the nightmare began for Marina. He began to bring friends to the house, drank for a day on the fly, and at the same time still demanded the stepmother to cover the table. He could wake her up in the middle of the night and send her to the Samagon, but Marina categorically refused to do this. She even had to run away a couple of times and spend the night in the next basement, where she once accidentally found a shelter for herself. Fortunately, someone threw a whole bunch of wooden boxes which Marina used to build a bed out of. It all ended as soon as she got a job as a nurse in a local hospital. She decided to stop this nightmare right away, and with her first salary, she rented a small but very cozy apartment on the outskirts. It was, of course, far from her job, but no one was already making a fuss, and did not require drinks and money. Every day began completely calm, and now Marina caught herself thinking that she was waking up and rejoicing every day. The work, of course, was not what the girl dreamed of at her age, but Marina was happy. She hoped to pull up the right items in a year and try to do it again. But for now, every morning she would gladly go to her therapy, as she thought, to help those who needed this help. The team took her in as their own from the first day. The nurses were all much older. Many would be suitable for their mothers or grandmothers by age. They really regretted the fragile, red-haired Marina and tried to take on the dirty work. She said that it was not right for her to change the diapers for men and take out the ducks, for which she was very grateful to them. Instead, Marina, on one breath, could wash the floor in the entire department for all the sanitary staff at once. Antonina Alexeyevna, who answered for the delivery of food to the patients, always, if something remained untidy, carefully packed it in a bag and gave it to Marisha, quietly saying, "You'll come home in the evening and you don't have to spend on food. All that money will be saved. You have no one to help you. I know how much you want while you're young." It really was a good bet in Marina's not-so-big budget. But not everyone in the hospital was as kind to their colleagues. The whole division of therapy seemed to be divided into two parts. The first is the junior medical staff, the current nurses and nurses who worked for pennies and did everything without any effort, with all their heart. In the second part, the doctors were ready to do anything to please Andrei Ignatievich, the head of this department. As specialists, they were almost perfect, but humanly, they were ready to literally destroy each other between themselves, just to deserve the praise of the management. A couple of times Albina Petrovna, her boss, saw Andrei Ignatievich from afar and decided to serve him. She tried to raise her voice, looking for a reason to fight against Marina's flawless work. But she calmly answered all her questions in response, and turned around and went on to do her business. She got used to defying herself since the time of life in Sochi, and now it was very useful to her. Marina cleaned the corridor when some unusual fuss began in the department. The patient was urgently transferred from the only two-bed room to the third. The senior nurse almost ran there, pushing Stepanovna, a nurse who worked with Marina, to the shift. "Stepanina, well, you're barely able to get your feet out of the way," the head nurse shouted at her. "If you don't have time in half an hour, you'll have a flash here." As soon as she left, Marina came to find out what was the rush and the screams. And Stepanovna told that in the reception department they are appointing some rich man to them. They say that a famous businessman in the city, breathing, Nanny added, who brought him to us? No other way than unclean. He would go to the paid one. I don't understand at all what he thought. Usually, with such money, the institution is bypassed by the rich. I will wash the apartment. Marina offered her help, but Stepanovna, knowing that the bosses would not like it, politely refused. Half an hour later, from the usual two-bedroom apartment, it was almost possible to make a one-bedroom suite suitable for the rich. From the head office, beautiful table times, kettle, and microwave were brought. The older nurses borrowed an unusual napalm vase and a jug with a couple of glasses. They even managed to find an old but quite working TV. Having stopped at the exit of the room, Stepanovna, who was evaluating everything, looked at the TV and, sadly smiling, said, I would lie down for a couple of weeks in such a place, but apparently our brother is not allowed to have such honors. Only she said, as the boss came running, and instead of a word of gratitude for such a quick, perfect job, she whispered that the patient's mouth should be looked at. Any wish, a whim, everything was guessed at. He has so much money that he can buy the whole department at will. In general, look at me so that everything shines. He must be satisfied with everything. As soon as she left, Stepanovna grumbled in anger. And the cream will take the mists off. I think they are so angry with Ignatic. They are waiting for the patient's money, and we are waiting for you. Okay, let's go, Marishka, or they will bring this bourgeoisie now. They left the ward, closing the door, and went further, each in their own business. When they brought the new patient, Marina did not see, but immediately noticed how a special nervousness began around his ward. Doctors and nurses came in to check her health, to check her blood pressure. Albina Petrovna took a closer look, and more often than others to check her blood pressure. Once again, she appeared in the hospital corridor. She called Marina and ordered her to go to the banker with another cleaning. By that time, the entire department of therapy knew that the new patient, the owner of the largest bank in the city. In Marina's eyes, a fright appeared. She wanted to go all out, just not to go into this room. For some reason, it always seemed to her that bankers should be fat uncles with a sweaty face, grumpy and evil in everything. But she could not obey the authorities. Knocking with a trembling hand, Marina opened the room. And without raising his eyes, Robka asked for permission to do the cleaning. A pleasant male voice answered, Yes, it seems clean, but if necessary, then it is necessary. Order is order, come in, of course. Marina looked at the speaker and almost dropped the bucket of surprise. Instead of the supposed fat man, a real handsome man lay on the bed. The first thing she noticed was, these are beautiful and very kind eyes. A couple of minutes, Marina stood like a digger, but quickly remembered and took up cleaning. Unexpectedly, the patient said something simple and kind. Here, imagine a wedding on the nose, and I was here, I thought, for a couple of days at home. I'll lie down with the temperature, and it came out like this. At that moment, the patient started coughing. And Marina, quickly taking off her gloves, gave him a glass of water. She said, helping him drink, Don't worry, we have the best doctors in town. They will cure you quickly. And now you'd better sleep. After all, peace, sleep, and good treatment are the most important. She carefully fixed the patient's blanket, and the one who smiled at her, thankfully, covered his eyes. The rest of the day, Marina, she did what she thought was right for the new patient. She was amazed how, being rich as everyone says, he was treating them and talking to them as equals. Although she understood perfectly what kind of gap there was between them, when she left the hospital in the evening, Anton was already waiting for her. Half a year after their first meeting, he often met her from work. They were just walking around the city, going to the movies, and Marina really liked this conversation. But she was still afraid to move the relationship to a new stage of life together. It seemed to her that for this they know each other too little and persuaded Anton to wait. When she was happy with this question, she began to speak. Oh, Antosh, I can't imagine what we had today. They brought some banker with a suspicion of inflammation of lungs to the department. What happened there? Everyone is running, serving, they gave him a whole ward. The head of the department even brought his TV from the office. They say that this banker has so much money that you can buy the whole hospital. I thought he was old, harmful, but he is not at all. simple as all people, and he talks to me as if we've known each other for 100 years. Anton stopped and, taking her by the chin, asked him jokingly, "Hey, didn't my cute mouse fall in love with that money bag?" It's good it was dark, and he couldn't see how the blushed face of the girl. "Oh, come on." She waved at Anton. "Say what?" "I have you. Let's go. Why are you standing?" That evening, Marina was left alone, thinking that the handsome man from the hospital room was not going crazy. He really liked her very much, although she saw him several times in a day. Once when she came to clean up, the second time when the boss asked her to bring him lunch, which was clearly not prepared in the hospital canteen. This time, as soon as she entered the ward, the patient happily smiled and offered to meet, telling her that it would be easier for them to communicate while he was in the ward. Nikolai, the banker's name, asked Marina to come more often, saying that he would be very happy. And at that moment, she was ready not to leave work at all and to work all day in his bed. The next morning, only after taking on her duties, she decided to check the patient's room. The door was slightly open, and Marina took the door handle as she heard a woman's voice. An invisible stranger told her, "Arthur, enough of the drifts. Your task is to get the medicine they were talking about, and I'll just put the wedding drink in the groom's hand. Half an hour, and the job is done. I am a young widow, and you, my faithful, devoted friend, will soon become my spouse. You understand that in this case you will no longer be someone's companion, but a full-fledged owner of everything he has." The speaker laughed at her, and her interlocutor, silent, replied, "You understand that this is risky. If everything is hidden, we will be imprisoned, and I definitely do not want to go to prison." "Listen, enough of this crap." The woman was angry. "Be a man." I thought it all through and even talked to the doctor. He said that Nicholas would let her go to the wedding, so he wrote it all off. He said that they didn't finish the treatment, didn't examine it. This disease was said to be on the heart. The heart of the little one got up. "Maybe you've already changed your mind?" We both thought this plan through, and this hospital is right on our hands. You would know how hard it is. I persuaded him to go to this particular hospital, not the paid department, because there, for sure, they would drag us to the courts, fighting for our reputation. With these little... She couldn't believe that all that she heard was not a dream, and she stood there for a few minutes like a... She tried to look at the guests without noticing the conversation of which she had just heard. The girl was very beautiful, tall, well-built, with perfect makeup, and in a boundless sitting, a brocade suit. She looked like a model, which Marina saw only on TV. The young man was her substitute, tall, with a neat beard, and in an obviously expensive suit. He looked at Marina with some kind of frown, and even the goosebumps ran over his skin. She tried to get out of the room quickly, but the conversation between the two of them did not come out of her head. Having learned for a moment, she came up to Stepanovna and whispered, "Anna Stepanovna, do you happen to know who those two who were in the room of our rich man are?" She, with a sly look, also whispered, "Why do you need it?" It was his fiancée. While he was driving me to the fluorography, he told me that our doctor promised to put him on his feet quickly so that he could get married and dance at his wedding. The handsome man who was with her, they say, forgot the word, well, the one who does some business with him. "You girl, look, don't think about anything there. Such a beauty will quickly break your legs." Marina made an indifferent face and giggled. "I need it. I have Xantoha, and he's so handsome and rich. He only needs such a bride. And I'm poor. As Anton says, a mouse." After a breath, she went to wash the next room, but she already thought about how to find time and carefully and tactically tell the rich man what she heard while he was away. When everything was already thought out, she began to look for a reason to go to the banker. And then, all of a sudden, everything happened naturally. "Oh, Maria!" Elena interrupted her thought. "The young nurse. Help me, please. I have no time at all. Please go to our elite room, where the banker is. Bring me this recipe. Tell the doctor to prepare for discharge. But these medicines must be bought and drunk as prophylactic." Well, in general, everything is written there. Thank you in advance. I ran to put the dropper of the granny in the fourth. Marina grabbed her hand and said in a frightened voice, "Wait, but you know that it is not prohibited to do this by instructions." On the one hand, she wanted to tell the patient about the conspiracy as soon as possible. On the other hand, she was very afraid to do this, but the friend was persistent. Well, what do you want? 1 minute. She handed over the paper, and you're free. If I don't put this dirty money in the Dropbox now, she'll come back to the head of the family. Don't be afraid, go. No one will know anything. Lena literally pushed Marina towards the bank's ward and ran to the other end of the corridor. And Marina unnervingly knocked. Nikolai, seeing her, smiled and said, Imagine, Marina, I'm lucky. Thank God I didn't get to the inflammation of the lungs, and I feel much better. Come in, don't be shy. What do you have in your hands? Marina passed on the words of everything that the nurse said, and before giving the prescription, she took out a sheet of paper from her pocket, rolled up several times. She thought for a long time how to tell Nicholas about what she heard, and decided to write everything down on paper. It was more convenient this way. Give it back without staying in his room for long, which their management was very angry about. It seemed to her that this was the most convenient way to convey information. Marina wrote this literally immediately after the visit of Nikolai, and the only chance to give the message was now. While pulling Nikolai's paper, she quietly said, I'm sorry, I know it's not my business. But you can't show up at the wedding. Be careful. Everything is written here. Having given the leaflets, she immediately ran out of the room and tried not to think about what had happened. When it was time to go and do the cleaning in the banker's room, Marina in fear stepped into the door, trying not to look at Nikolai. She did not know how he would react to her note, but decided to pretend as if nothing had happened. For 5 minutes, he quietly watched her, trying to wipe the dust off all surfaces. Then he said unexpectedly, Marina, after reading your message carefully, I first thought that you were crazy. Then I decided that you, fell in love with me, so you're trying to break off the wedding. But thinking about it, I realized your note is true because you did not know many things and everything was described in great detail. Thank you, of course, for deciding to report on this, but the wedding will take place, and I will still go to her. Angelica really wants to celebrate our celebration as soon as possible because she is pregnant, and that means everything will be like that. Nikolai winked at Marina and sadly added, Don't be sad, beauty, everything will be fine. Why not to forget it? At that moment, Marina was ready to kneel down and beg Nikolai not to go to the wedding. She was very sorry for this kind, smart, and cute man, but she understood that it would not be able to stop him. Marina looked at him with prayer in her eyes and quietly said, But can a loving person wish evil? She loves you, doesn't she? As if frightened by her sudden curiosity, Marina shut up and went to the door of the room. But the voice of the patient made her stop. You see, Marina, suddenly he started to be kind. Life is such a thing that sometimes you don't understand what's really going on. So, I and Angelica somehow quickly got involved. In fact, I'm in business not so long ago. My father was in charge of everything before that. But years go by, and it became difficult for him to manage the entire empire. So he decided to give me all the business. It was he who somehow, at one of the meetings, introduced me to Angelica, but also her parents. After that, he said in secret that he dreams of being related to this family. There is no less state there, if not more than ours. So my father wanted me to get married faster. And our businesses have united. I don't understand why I'm telling you this. It's probably because it's not customary to share something personal in our circles. And I want to talk to you without fear. Marina looked at Nikolai and said, I also enjoy talking to you. Maybe you should think about postponing the wedding? The banker smiled sadly and replied, No, everything has already been decided. My father is seriously ill. He is afraid that he will not live long. He is in a hurry, so please make him happy. Marina left the room and thought that she really wanted to help Nikolai, but she did not know how. The decision came very suddenly. That same evening, returning home, she turned on her old TV as usual and wanted to switch the news channel. As if she had seen her acquaintances, the whole screen was shown a photo of a happy, smiley Nikolai hugging his bride. Then the pictures of gorgeous limos and a huge banquet hall began to flash. The dictator told how carefully the preparations were going for one of the most loud wedding celebrations of the year, how much money was spent on dresses for young people, restaurants, and other wedding attributes. At the end, he said that the ceremony would take place the next day, at noon. And Marina immediately decided for herself, no matter how much it cost her, she must get to this wedding. Moreover, she had a day off. Marina understood that this was the most noticeable decision in her life, but she did not want to do otherwise. It seemed to her that some inner voice insisted on being at that moment next to Nikolai and trying to prevent the terrible. Having decided not to tell anything to Anton, she was upset with her bad self-esteem and refused to meet on the weekend, and she began to prepare for the wedding. She carefully laid down her hair and, wearing it, was satisfied with her reflection in the mirror. But all her confidence disappeared as soon as she saw what outfits the guests came in. Men in all strict costumes, women in almost all long evening dresses with glittering expensive decorations. For a minute, confused, Marina stopped at the entrance to the restaurant. But then, she gathered up and walked inside. Nikolai, smiling, was greeting the guests. The bride was standing in the side of the room, surrounded by her friends. On the crossroads, Marina walked 2 meters and crashed and tried to block her way. But the banker called him right away, and when he found out, he ordered to let her pass. It was clear that he was surprised by her appearance, and Marina heard him telling the guard, "Let this crazy woman pass. Let her pass, since she has already come." These words made Marina understand that he did not believe what she wrote to him. But she decided not to step back from what she had planned, and, stepping aside, began to watch what was happening. It was very awkward for her to be among all this crowd, and the guests looked at her with some kind of frivolity. She looked like a beggar in her Reese dress. Even the waitresses in the city of the establishment were dressed more decently than she did. Marina was hungry and choked with a throatful of food, and, holding back her tears, began to calm herself down by the fact that she had come to save a good man. And no matter what, it was not worth it. "I'm sure he'll save you." Thinking about all this, Marina suddenly noticed how Angelica, turning her back on the guests and the groom, quickly poured something into a glass of champagne. Immediately, turning with a seductive smile to Kolya, she stretched out a drink for him. Then everything was like in a terrible dream. Marina threw herself at the groom and with all her might drank the glass. After pouring out the remains of the costume, he fell on the floor with a ringing and scattered into small pieces. The coffin silence came to the hall, and Nikolai, remembering, shouted, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? Guard, put this half-brained one out. Let the fool, for the good of the soul." She decided to make a mess here. Guard, taking Marina under his elbow, led her to the exit. And she had nothing left to do but go home. The whole evening Anton was calling, but she didn't want to talk to anyone at all. The next morning, only after she came to work, she felt some increased interest in herself. Everyone, seeing her, shuddered and glared at her. Only from Lena's blabber, she learned what the reason for all these glances was. It turned out, almost all the local publications on the front lines posted an article about yesterday's banquet and its outcome. At the same time, someone wrote that, as if the crazy one broke through to the celebration without invitation. Others described her arrival as a jealousy of the sanitary rich. Marina was ready to fall through the ground from all this nonsense. But all this was darkened after. As she read in the newspaper given by Lenka that after the banquet in the car on the way home, the banker felt sick. He was in a serious condition and was sent to the hospital. And at that moment Marina realized that Nikolai had managed to drink the poison. The day she heard the whole conversation about his poisoning in the ward, she remembered the name of the drug that the bride demanded and returned home. She began to look in the medical certificate she had bought. At this moment Marina was glad that she was preparing to enter the medical school. Having learned about the medicine, she understood that Nicholas had managed to drink at least half a glass, but the poison and alcohol did their job. All the news headlines of that day were dedicated to the unfortunate banker. The newlyweds gave an interview. The picture was so good, and even a couple of times she tried to shed a tear. She read it on camera, outraged. "This is all your free medicine." I told him, "Let's go to the paid clinic." But Kolya didn't agree. "It's the doctor's fault. First, he treated everyone as much as possible, and then, sooner, he released him from the hospital. Kolya was still sick, and this bastard, the head of the hospital, I'm sure I let him go for a bribe. Marina was all over the place. She knew who was on the case and what for. And the doctors didn't blame her for anything. They even fined her a bribe, which he didn't take for sure. Every time there was supposed to be news, she left everything behind and quietly approached the patient's resting place, where the TV was working. Marina was eager to catch every word as soon as they started talking about their former patient. But the news was not good news. Doctors fought with all their might for his life, but Nikolai became only worse. She scolded herself for not drinking the Fuger a couple of minutes earlier, because then he would not have had time to drink even that part of the poison that he drank. During the working day, Anton called her several times. But she, after writing a text message that she was very busy, decided to postpone this conversation for a while. Marina understood perfectly well. He was already sure of what had happened and most likely saw her photo from a restaurant in some newspaper. By the evening, she immediately saw Anton nervously stepping into the hospital. As soon as she came up, the guy began to indifferently complain. "Can you explain what it was? Are you out of your mind? Are you completely crazy? You run like a dog after this rich man." That evening, they had a very strong fight for the first time. And already coming home, Marina unexpectedly even said to herself, "You know what? If you are already making such scandals to me now, what will happen next? You can't live with a person if you don't trust him. I think we'd better part ways." Anton became so angry. But apparently, after realizing that Marina wasn't joking, he got angry. "Well, you're a fool. Get out of here." He turned around and left. And surprisingly, Marina felt relieved. It was at this moment that she was glad that she didn't give them a relationship of development. And now it was important for her to help Nikolai. It seemed that some forces were pushing her to do it. The next day, when she barely came to work, Stepanovna reported that a check had been put in the hospital. With a conspiracy whisper, she said, "Can you imagine what's going on? The head doctor and our head of the department have been removed, so to speak, before the investigation. No, well, they come to work, so to speak, to know where to be, but they sit in their offices and do not come out." Many thought that the condition of the patients who fell into the coma was solely the fault of the doctors in their department. And only Marina knew who was actually responsible for what had happened. Thinking, she decided to tell everything to the head of the department. Andrei Ignatievich silently listened to her and said sadly, "If the bastards used the drug you were talking about, it's almost impossible to prove that it was poisoning. He, like a bomb of slow action, kills not immediately but in time. Now it is clear why the patient felt bad on the way home. It's lucky that they didn't let him drink a glass to the bottom. In this case, he would definitely not have made it alive. And the worst thing is that this poison is so insidious that it is almost impossible to find it in the blood, especially after time has passed." Andrei Ignatievich sighed and added, "Leave it, Marina. Let the rich people figure out themselves who wanted to poison and who wanted to take their place. I got it. As you can see, I wanted to do good to a person, put him on his feet faster. I wanted him to be more or less healthy at the wedding, and instead I got an accusation and all the hard ones. Let everything go as it goes." After the conversation, Marina decided to do anything to get the poisoners to the clean water. She didn't quite understand how to do it, but she still had one idea. Having received the moment, she approached Lena with a prayer in her eyes. She had already boasted several times that she was meeting a guy who served in the police. "Lena, my dear, help me, help me. I really need to know where our banker's father lives. He also said when he was lying here that he was very sick. So I want to know maybe what kind of help he needs. Ask your Oleg to find out the address, and in general, with whom he lives there, and I will do whatever you want for it." Linka looked at her slyly and whispered, "And at night you will stay and insure yourself. If you wake up, then we are here for a few hours." Seeing how Marina was energetically nodding, she laughed and added, well, run up in an hour. I think something will happen." An hour later, Marina already knew that Nicholas's father was called Lev Valerianovich. He lives alone in a large country house. His wife died a few years ago, and Kolya, living separately, came by necessity, which changed almost every couple of months. The most interesting thing is that the story of Lena suddenly stopped. Oleg says that it is not at all clear why these seats are being avoided. This child is a well-known businessman in the city, and everywhere they talk about him as a tactful, smart, and kind person. Well, great, Marina said happily. So now I will take care of him until Nikolai gets better. Moreover, I think it is not easy for him now. On the same day, right after work, Marina went to the address received from Lena and, while pretending to be a maid, immediately found a common language with Nikolai's father. He really, despite his status, turned out to be a very kind and open person. Having decided that he could not be dragged for long, Marina told him everything she knew about the insidious Angelica and about poisoning his son. She saw that the old man didn't believe her like her son. While she was talking, Lev Valerianovich was looking out the window. Then he turned around and said something. It's complete nonsense. Father Angel is my best friend and almost a companion. Why would I bother him? We dreamed of marrying our children, joining a business, and having a grandchild. Marina suddenly did not answer in the same tone. And you don't think they didn't want to unite or share with someone, but just wanted to take over your business? Grandfather looked at her harshly, but did not answer anything. The rest of the day, he spent almost not communicating with Marina, immersed in some of his thoughts. Already in the evening, when she was about to leave, Lev Valerianovich said, "You see, Marina, not everything in life is measured by money. I myself don't know how much longer I will live, but Nikolai, my only son, should live whatever it costs. He is all I have." Marina turned around and with tears in her eyes barely heard. "Well, you need to live and you will live, and Nikolai will definitely put on his feet. And it's good that he didn't drink the whole glass with the poison. There is a chance of survival." The next day, she ran into the department to write a statement on vacation for her account, deciding not to quit. Lena was already waiting for her and whispered in her tongue. She heard the news. The whole city was noisy. Our bride left, and it turned out that she had turned everything around so that the marriage contract had not been made before the marriage. I don't know why. And now the management of all the business of our banker is in your hands. For now, of course, during the disease of the little husband, but in case you know what, she will be a full-fledged owner. Father Nicholas has already signed everything off to his son. It cannot be said that this news surprised Marina, but when she went to the cottage village to Lvov Valerianovich, she bought several different publications. Where Angelica was in full bloom again, giving an interview. She didn't have a drop of sadness on her face, and she almost didn't mention her husband's coma. But she was very active in managing his business. At the same time, she often mentioned her father, saying that he was supporting and helping in everything. Lev Valerianovich carefully studied the press brought by Marina. After that, he took off his glasses and said something sad. "Yeah, that happens. I got sick and left the business. Kolya did very well without me, and I honestly had no time for that. I feel better now, and then I thought I wouldn't last a couple of days. Marina, please give me the phone. He made just one call." She did not hear the conversation itself, but Lev Valerianovich, having talked to someone, said that in half an hour a very good man would come. He should be met. The guest appeared at exactly the time specified. It was a stable, gray-haired gentleman of about the same age as the owner. They talked for a long time about something in his office, after which the man left, and Marina, the slave, went to Lev Valerianovich. He was sitting by the window, and, getting tired, he nervously smoked a pipe. "You can't do that. Give me that shit right now," she yelled at him in a dismay. The owner, not turning around, stretched out her pipe and thoughtfully spoke. "How wrong I was when I thought I was good at dealing with people. Having lived so many years in the white light, I didn't think that some people were capable of this. I helped Victor, my current father-in-law, to start a business from scratch. What's the sin of hiding? And Nikolai married Ansel more at my will." It turned out that the former head of security of the company had come to visit him. Now he is a well-deserved pensioner and a good friend of Lev Valerianovich. It was he who told in detail that the family of Ansel did not dream of giving birth to him at all. They had a completely different plan. Despite allegedly being friends with Lvov Valerianovich, the bride's father literally slept and saw how to take his business. And when he found out that he was very sick and wrote off everything he had a son, He thought about this insidious plan of poisoning Nikolai together with his daughter. He didn't even take Lvov Valerianovich into account, as if he was already dead. Having spoken out, the owner suddenly turned to Marina and said, "So, Marishka, prepare my parade, so to speak, costume. It's time to go to the bank. Tomorrow morning I'll ask Ilya. This is because David came here. He will organize the transport and help me to go and put everything in place." He winked. He cheerfully added, "It's too early for them to write us off the accounts. We'll still fight." The next day, the very next morning, the driver helped Lev Valerianovich to get out of the wheelchair. He was able to fold the wheelchair and put it in the trunk. "Lev Valerianovich, how are you feeling? Can I go with you?" Marina, who came out to see them, asked. The owner smiled at home and calmly replied, "No, honey, stay at home. I think I can handle it myself. Today is the board meeting of directors, and all the men there are smart. I think they'll figure it out quickly." Marina stretched a bubble with medicine and said, don't worry, you can't. Take this hard drop. If anything, let it always be at hand, and everything will be fine." At that moment, she really believed in what she said. The time of waiting for her return seemed eternal to her. And just hearing the noise of the approaching car, she sighed with relief and ran to meet him. Lev Valerianovich looked very tired. And seeing not my question in Marina's eyes, he said in a weak voice, "Don't worry, everything is fine, thank God. Our children's bank is still ours. I had a hard time there. Thank you, Slavka. He was driving me there on this cart." He looked at the driver with gratitude, who at that moment helped him to sit on the wheel. At home, after changing clothes, he lay on the couch and, having taken the medicine, he lay on the bed for half an hour. Marina, in the form of his state, decided to wait for him to rest and tell how it all went. Over the past few days, they became very friendly, and Lev Valerianovich liked talking to her. Having rested a little and calmed down, he told that the trip was very difficult for him. It was very difficult to persuade the board of directors to leave the bank for their family, but he still succeeded. Marina was sincerely happy, and only one thing saddened them both, and that is that Nikolai's condition remained stable and heavy. In the morning, Marina caught Lev Valerianovich in a very unpleasant state. It is not known what more affected his health, whether it was a son's anxiety or a trip to the bank. Only Marina immediately called the doctor. Lev Valerianovich had been under the supervision of a professor in the city for a long time. He stayed in the owner's room for a long time, then came out and invited Marina to talk. "I understand that until Nikolai is in a coma, there is no one else to take care of Grandpa except you. And by the way, he responded very well to you. So you just have to persuade him to the operation. He needs a transplantation of the bone brain. If he doesn't do this in the near future, he won't be able to do it soon. This is the only chance to escape." The doctor left, and Marina went to Lvov Valerianovich's room with a firm intention to talk about the surgery. But he only sighed and said with a weak voice, "So, am I against it? But where can I get a donor? I already contacted a famous foreign bank, but there is also a queue." Marina was surprised, looked at him, and asked, "And your son, Kolya, why didn't you call him right away when you found out about the disease?" He kept silent for a while and quietly began to speak. "Once, when I was young, I was very much in love with one girl. They even built plans to marry, to have children, but they broke up for no reason. And after a few years, I married a woman who loved me very much and lived happily, until Lena died of cancer. Even money did not help save her. From the first day, we lived soul to soul. There was one problem. Not long before the wedding, I caught some kind of infection, even getting into a reanimation, after which it could not be about children. But Lena, having learned this, did not abandon me, but suggested taking the baby from the orphanage. It was Kolya who became our happiness and meaning of life. So, as you now understand, Marina, he can't be my donor because he's not my relative." Marina saw how hard it was for Lvov Valerianovich to tell this story. And as soon as she left the room, she brought a sedative. Having drunk the medicine, he looked at Marina and suddenly said, "You know, I still don't understand who you're reminding me of. Only now, remembering everything, I realize that you are very similar to my first love." Bring me a photo album with photos in my office, in the top of the table. Marina, having fulfilled his request, stretched out a small velvet rectangle. And Lev Valerianovich, right on the touch, pulled out a picture and stretched it out. Having taken a black and white photo in his hands, Marina lowered herself to the chair next to her, and without breaking away, began to look at her. "Dear, are you unwell?" The owner was scared and climbed up on the pillow. "What happened?" "You know this woman?" With difficulty, Marina spoke out her words, almost whispering. "Her name is Olga?" Seeing that Lev Valerianovich was nodding, she added, holding back her tears. "This is my mother. She died of a severe illness, completely unexpectedly. Doctors then said that we had started everything, and she had never complained about her health. I found out later that she drank, and she was very weak and suffered." Looking at the owner, Marina saw that he, without breaking away, looked at her and cried silently. Then suddenly asked, more precisely, the date of your birth. When Marina called the date, month, and year, he thought for a couple of seconds, as if he was calculating something, and then stretched his arms to her. "You are my daughter. That's for sure. There can be no doubt. When we parted with Olia, I also noticed that she had become something else. She was pale, she couldn't eat normally, and she was sick of it. She was pregnant with you, as it turned out. How could I not have guessed at once? What an idiot." Marina took him in her arms and, holding back her tears, burst into tears. They talked for a long time, holding on. Lev Valerianovich wanted to learn as much as possible about the life of her mother and about herself. The next day, when the doctor came to examine, Marina told him the circumstances that had opened up and told him that she was ready to become a donor for her father on the same day, as long as he lived. But it's not done so quickly. The doctor surprised her with her answer. First, she needs to do a DNA test on her family and then decide the question of the operation. A few days later, the document was ready, confirming that they were father and daughter. The preparations for the operation began immediately, and as if someone heard Marina's prayers from above. And on the day when Lvov Valerianovich was supposed to operate, they called the department where Nikolai was lying and reported that he had come to consciousness. This news was very pleasing to the businessman, and before the operation, he said to Marina, "And the son seems to have gotten out of bed." Marina, the same day she found out that Nikolai had been better, went to his clinic. She became a visitor to Lev Valerianovich and Nikolai every day. He was surprised by the appearance of Marina. "Again you are really crazy, but it seems you were right. You drank a glass at the wedding because you knew that there was poison there." Marina told everything from the beginning, how the bride spilled this poison before, as the father was told about the evil minds of the whole insidious family, and about the return business. "I will destroy it. I will wipe the face of the earth." The first thing that Nikolai said at the end of the conversation was evil. Then, for a second, he said silently, "Although, why would you smear your hands on this bastard? I'll tell the lawyer to file a divorce tomorrow." At that moment, Marina didn't say another thing. She said that it was the daughter of Lev Valerianovich, and she decided to postpone it for another time. She left after saying goodbye, promising to come back again after Lev Valerianovich's visit. What a surprise it was when the next day, only after stepping over the threshold of the room where Nikolai was lying, she saw Angelica struggling in hysterics. She was crying, trying to tell her about her love, asking not to get divorced. But when she saw Marina, he suddenly said, "I can't see you. I hate you. A stranger, an ordinary nurse from the hospital, treats me better than my dear wife. If it weren't for her, you would definitely have become a widow. For your own happiness." Marina looked at the poisoner with a call and said, "I'm not a stranger. I'm the daughter of Lev Valerianovich. How can he be cured and confirm this?" It was difficult at that moment to say who had the biggest surprise, Nikolai or Angelica. Only after that, she, knocking on the door, jumped out of the room, and Nikolai. He looked at Marina with a smile and said, "Well, redhead, you haven't stopped surprising me since the first day. Come on, spread it out." Marina told her mother's love for Lvov Valerianovich, about their separation, about their life with their mother. After listening to the end, Nikolai suddenly took her hand and quietly said, You know you're extraordinary. When I get up on my feet, will you agree to go on a date with me? What are you looking at? I know you're not my child. Mom Lena said before she died, which means I can invite you to thank me for saving you. Marina felt how red her face was, but when she looked down, she didn't think and answered, of course. Why would I try to save you? Such a fool. Nikolai and Lvov Valerianovich were discharged one day, and his faithful friend, Father Ilya, or rather, the well-known Ilya Borisovich, sent a car to which all the recovered were brought home. Marina covered the festive table for their return, for which everyone shared new emotions with joy. At some point, Kolya looked at Marina and suddenly said, I was in the hospital thinking about everything and how absurd it sounds I ask you to hold your daughter's hands. This red beast surprised me from day one. She doesn't look like any girl I knew. And after she saved me, and you, I just have to marry her. Moreover, I know that we do not have a blood relative. Lev Valerianovich smiled and replied in a jubilant manner. Here you are. You will get divorced with your bitch. Come to get married. But what's there? Ilya, help me to organize another noisy feast. What to do if my son's wife changes her gloves? Ilya Borisovich, invited to this dinner, smiled and replied, Lyova, who in this life is not mistaken. Moreover, here it is still necessary to find out whose mistake it was. But now I hope marriage will last for centuries. I'll do everything that depends on me. Nikolai took Marina's hand and asked politely, Do you agree? She smiled happily and hugged him. At that moment, she was really, really happy, and not in a dream, as it was before, but in his life. If you like the story, please support me with the thumbs up button. For you, one simple action, but for me it is extremely important. Thank you in advance, and all the best.